Hey, what's up? Justin from Make Supply here, and today's video is for all the people designing their own templates on the computer, specifically using Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to show you my foolproof method for making sure that the hole spacing you design in your Illustrator matches up to whatever diamond stitching chisel or pricking iron that you're using in your work. You know, whether that be Weaver, Cinnabrook, KS Blade Punch, Saiwa, the list goes on. As long as you know the spacing between the tips of those irons, this method will work for you. In today's example, we're going to be looking at one of the most common ones, and that is having a panel and a gusset and wanting to make sure that all of the holes match up correctly. And I use this all the time, whether it's a small little gusseted pouch up through a medium size map case template, all the way up to the full size messenger bag that I did for last week's video. And by no means do you have to be a professional at Illustrator to make this work. However, some working knowledge of the program will be extremely beneficial to you. All right, that's enough talking. Let's get working. All right, the first thing we're going to do once we open up Illustrator is create a new artboard. I like to work with a nice large artboard. That way I can move around the pieces as I see fit. So although I'll be working with millimeter, I'm just going to do 25 inches here by 25 inches here, and then change it to millimeter and create. Now I'm going to go ahead and set all the guides and grid parameters that I want. I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, Guides and Grid. You can choose whatever guide color you want, and then grid line here, I'm going to do 10 millimeter. Click OK. Now we're going to turn on all those guides and grids. I'm going to go to View, Rulers, Show Rulers, View, Show Grid, View, Snap to Grid. We're going to turn that on and off as we work on our project, but I like to start with it on. And then we're also going to turn on Smart Guides. So you go to View, Smart Guides. So for our example pattern piece, we're going to make a little pouch that needs a gusset, and we want all of the stitching holes accurately marked. To do that, I'm going to go to Rectangle Tool and just come up with something here. So I'm from America, I work in inches, but I'm slowly migrating to metric. I like to start with inches and then do a conversion. So it's going to be 6 inches wide, so that comes out to about 152.4 millimeters. I'm going to make it a nice even number, 155 here. And then 4 inches height comes out to like 101.6 millimeters, so I'm just going to round that down to 100 millimeters, as you see here. Go ahead and click OK. First thing I like to do is get rid of that fill, so we're just working with the stroke. Next, what we're going to do is round the bottom corners so it gives a nice little design. I'm going to go ahead and use the direct select tool right here. That's this white arrow, not the black arrow. So you grab the white arrow and just grab the whole bottom part of the design here. And you can see these two little circles. That means we're going to be editing those corners. And then go up here where it says corners, live corners. And you can put whatever you want in there. I'm going to go with 30. And that gives us a nice little rounded bottom pouch design. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just put a vertical guide down the middle. So if you just grab your piece with the selection tool, you can see that little circle in the middle. That's your middle line. It's going to put a guide there just so we know where the vertical middle is. Now we want to get the stitching line. So I'm going to select my pattern, do Object, Path, Offset Path. And whatever your stitching line you want, so I'm going to go with 3 millimeters, you want to put in a negative number here. So it goes on the inside of the shape. You can see that with the preview, just like that. If you do a non-negative number, it'll put it on the outside. We don't want that. So go ahead and click OK. So now you can see how this would look like as a leather product. You would, be scratching that interior line there as your stitching line. Next thing we're going to do is get rid of this top line because we don't need stitching holes along the top line. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to use the scissor tool and just click on those corners there. That'll cut the design, and then just select it and delete. Next, we want to convert this straight line into stitching holes. So you're going to go ahead and select your line, bring up the stroke panel. Should be over here, but if it's not, you can find it in the window. First thing I'm going to do is bring up the thickness of the weight a little bit. So I'm going to bring it up to like 1.5, just so you can see it. The cap, you're going to do round cap, and then dash line. So here is where we need to decide what our stitching hole length is going to be. And this is what will correspond with your pricking irons or whatever you want really. But if you're using a 5mm pricking iron, you're going to put 5mm. And if you're using a 3.85, you're going to use 3.85. So for dash, you always put 0. And then for gap, that's where you put your number in. So we're going to do 5. So let's take a look at what we have here. And it doesn't look great, as you can see. On the right-hand side, it looks good. But on the left-hand side, it does not line up. And why is that? Well, the length of this line is not divisible equally by 5. So therefore, you cannot put equally spaced 5mm holes to complete on each side. Well, that's an issue. And the easiest thing to do is to then go over here. So this is the one we're using now. This preserves the exact 5mm spacing between the holes, the centers of the holes. If you click on this one over here, this will modify the distance between the hole slightly so it accurately lines up to each corner. So now you see it has a perfect fit. However, the problem with this is sometimes it changes the distance between the holes so drastically that it won't match up with your pricking irons, and that's not what we want. So we're going to go back to preserve exact dash, and we're just going to make this work. So here's how I do this. I'm going to go ahead and take off my dash line and kind of put it back to something a little bit more manageable to work with, something like that. I'm going to grab the inside shape here, and then I'm going to grab my scissor tool. And from there, I'm going to cut right at the bottom center. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Right there. So now what we're going to do, we're just going to work with this side and see how far we get. So I'm going to go ahead and bring back my dash line and take a look. So you can see that we have it nicely and evenly spaced in the center at the bottom. However, at the top, again, it doesn't fit all the way. There's a giant gap here. Now, if you're fine with that giant gap, you can go ahead and just do it this way. Well, you know, most of us, we want a nice even space. We have 3mm on the left here, so we should probably have something close to 3mm on the top and a nice even space. So how I do this is we're going to have to modify this piece. The mindset you have to go in when you're designing these pieces with exact hole spacing, that you want exactly 5mm, is you're going to be designing from the hole spacing out, as opposed to the method of finding the exterior shape and then putting your stitch line in. Because no matter what you're going to do, this length is not divisible by 5. I'm going to select this and bring it back to a straight line again. And I'm just going to extend it a little bit so we can go past the design, see how much space we actually have. So I'm going to grab my scissor tool. I'm just going to cut here. It doesn't matter where you cut, really. And then I'm just going to grab and pull straight up. I like to go, you know, an inch or 2 or 3 past the edge. And now you have to rejoin these. So you're going to grab this and this, holding shift, and do object, path, join, or Control J if you're on Windows. So now our line is going out past the edge of our design, and I'm going to bring back our dash line, 0 and 5mm. And you can see that that 5mm space is basically dead right in the center of our hole. But, you know, if you're doing a leather project, you don't want that. So you have to decide whether you want to lower the height of this bar a little bit or you want to raise it. And I've decided that I want to keep this hole that's kind of split right now. I want this to be a part of my design, so I'm going to raise it up. And I'm also looking to have it match the distance that I have between my edge here, so that would be 3mm. There's probably other ways to do this, but I always just use blocks as kind of like little measurement tools. So I'll create a 3mm block, turn off the stroke. I make it a real thin line, so something like 0.1 0.1 millimeter. And then what I'm going to do is set this to match the middle of this hole. And this is where the smart guides help. It kind of lines everything up for you. So now I know that from this spacing up 3 millimeter is where I want my new outside piece, the panel, to reside. So I'm going to go ahead and pull down a horizontal guide. You might have to turn off snap to the grid before you do this because it's going to be in between these two lines here. So turn off your grid snapping and then pull down your line right to the center of that blue line. And your smart guides again will help with this. So that is the top, the new top of our design. Now what I'm going to do is cut this corner here, zoom out a little bit, and then I'm also going to cut down here at our center point. I'm basically going to be ignoring the entire right-hand side of this piece right now. I have a giant microphone sitting in front of my laptop here, so it's very hard to see all my buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and delete there as well. And then you can go ahead and delete basically the entire right-hand side of this design. Now what I'm going to do is grab my pen tool, click the end of that line, hold shift to make sure the line is straight, and then bring it up to that new line. Just like that. And that is where the new top of our line will be. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and just grab all of this for now. Do copy, and then paste in place. So if you don't know the shortcut for that, you just go to edit, paste in place, and it's going to put it right over top. And then you're going to go to object, transform, reflect. And you can see that it's going to flip it to the other side. If it's just flipping this piece, that means you didn't copy and paste correctly. There should be another one just like that. So I'm going to click OK. Probably turn on your snapping again so you can scroll it over faster. And let me show the intersection here. You can see here, now we're going to match up center hole to center hole, just like that. See the overlap? Perfect. And now we have a nice pouch with perfectly symmetrical design on both sides. I'm going to finish this off by selecting the panel side on both sides. Click join, which is a Control J or Apple J. That'll join it at the bottom. And then you also have to join it at the top, so you're going to do same thing, Apple J or Control J, or object path join. And now our piece is looking good. So before we move on to the next step, what I like to do is create a copy of this. It's probably a little technical for this, but right now, all of these holes here are considered a straight line to the computer. It doesn't care that these are dashes or little circles. This is considered a path. And what we want is to be able to individually select and edit these holes, and you can't do that in this current incarnation. So what we're going to do, like if you were like, oh, I want to get rid of my holes up here, well, you could see it gets rid of your whole line. So what we're going to do is just Control, copy, Control, paste, and just bring another one down. And I do this all the time for my designs because once I transform this into a different piece, if I want to go back to where I originally started and maybe modify the distance on these holes, I can just go right back to this piece instead of like have to look through my history. So now it is time to get rid of these extra holes at the top that we don't need. So you're going to go ahead and select both of these lines. Then you're going to do Object, Expand. And then you're going to expand the fill and the stroke. And you can see that. You see how it put, instead of there's a line down the middle of all of these, when you do Object Expand, now you can see that the line kind of circles each specific hole. That's what we want. And now we're going to get rid of all the compound paths and grouping. So you're going to do Object Ungroup, Object Compound Path Release, and just make sure there's no grouping. So ungroup should be grayed out. So now you can select all these holes individually. And you can go ahead and delete these extras. And then remember that we overlapped a hole at the bottom center. So you're going to have to remove that top layer hole. If you don't do this, you're going to pay for it dearly in the next step. So now we have a completed panel with all of our holes accurately marked. All right, and now it is time to create the gusset for this piece. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this tutorial, the way we think about these pieces is based on the amount of holes, so 5mm spaced holes and then out. So obviously I don't know right now how long the gusset is supposed to be. And to find that answer out, we have to know exactly how many holes we have here. And you can go ahead and count each one of these individually if you want, but I would rather the computer do it for me. So to do that, first we're going to select our panel piece, and we're going to lock this just to get it out of the way. So object lock selection. That way I can't select it. And if you have any extraneous little bits and bops, little circles, lines, anything in this vicinity, you want to get them out of there now or lock them. And obviously, like I said before in the previous step, that overlapping hole, you want to make sure you had deleted that. Otherwise, you're going to get a false number. So go ahead now and drag and select all of your holes. Just like that. And you're going to go to Window, Document Info, and then right when your document info comes up, you're going to go over this little menu bar here, this little icon, and then scroll down to Objects. And right here on the first one, it says Paths. You want this number here that says closed. So it says 65 closed. That means you have 65 holes. So now our gusset, we have to have 65 holes and then a 3mm margin to the outside edge. And that is the length of our gusset. And again, I don't know what that is right now off the top of my head, or I can't get it from the computer. Okay, so what we're gonna do is select your pen tool here. Make sure you have a stroke selected and no fill. And I'm just gonna make a long line, it doesn't matter. Just nice long line, something like that. And then I'm going to make it our 1.5mm thick. And we're gonna design it the same way we did the stroke here, the holes. So we're gonna do round cap, dash line, 0.5mm, and preserve exact dashes and gaps. And so now you have a long line of stitching holes that are exactly 5mm apart. You can see here, if we were to overlap, change the color just for viewing purposes here. And you can see how they overlap perfectly, the distance. All right, so I'm just gonna change this back to black. And now we're gonna do the same thing we did when we expanded this line. We're gonna do Object, Expand, Fill and Stroke, Object, Ungroup, Object, Compound Path, Release. So now, same thing, you're gonna grab all of these holes, and we're gonna see how many we have. Window, Document Info, Objects. So I have 85. Usually you can just like dock this over here and so it stays there. So I have to delete 20 of these holes. So I just start deleting, select. Doesn't matter from what side, just make sure when you are getting your measurement, you select all of them. 74, got a couple more to delete. 68, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so as you see, it says 65 closed, and over here, if I make sure my text isn't in there, again, 65 closed. So now we have the perfect amount of holes. Now we have to kind of work, this is a little bit of a manual process working inside out. I haven't found a really good quick process for doing this yet, but maybe I will. So I know I want my gusset height to be about 2 inches. 2 inches in millimeter is about 50.8 millimeters. So again, I'm going to round down to 50. Oops, so 50. And for my width, I'm just going to pick a number I think is bigger than this. So I don't know, 400, and convert it to a stroke. So you can see that looks like a gusset, and it's not really that much bigger. That's perfect. So with your gusset selected, you're going to do Object, Path, Offset Path, -3, the same as we did for our panel, just like that. And I'm just using this so I can put down a guide. I don't really care about this interior line right now. So with your snapping turned off and your smart guides on, pull down a guide right to the middle. And same thing on the bottom. And you can delete that interior piece. So now we have the 2 guides, which we're going to use to lay down our holes here. I'm going to go ahead and select them all. You can group these now, so you don't accidentally pull one off the line. So go ahead and group. And I'm not worried about any center lines at the moment, so you can kind of ignore that. I'm only worried about the horizontal line. So you're just going to move this up so it intersects. Your smart guide will kind of put that X there in the center. You see that? Right on that red line. Just like that. And if you want to check, use the direct select tool here, and you can see the squares here are directly on the line. So you're perfectly centered. Okay, so next step is to copy and paste in place the same way we did before, and then grab those holes, that whole line of grouped holes, and move it down to the bottom. You don't want to hit any left or right. You just want to go down. And make sure that they intersect in the middle. They do. Perfect. And as you can see here, we have our stitching holes on the left and the right side of the gusset. And now we just have to cut this to fit. I'm going to scroll over. And again, I'm going to use my building block measurement tool. So I need 3 millimeters on the end. So I'm just looking for the center of this hole here. Turn off my snapping. You can see that pink line come up right there. That means that's the center, right, the intersect point. So that's the middle of that hole there. And now I want to go 3 millimeters out, and that will be my end. Just like that. And then from there, you can cut on both sides, top and bottom. And Control J or Apple J to join the line. And that's one side. You're going to do the same thing for the other side. Here's the end hole. I'm going to do a 3 mil by 3 mil square. Make it a nice thin line. Line that up to the center. Go ahead and grab a vertical guide and place it in the middle of that path there. And now you know where to cut. And you join your end piece, and now you have, let me get rid of these guides so we can see this better. Perfectly symmetrical 5 millimeter spaced hole spacing panel piece, as well as your perfectly spaced 5 millimeter gusset piece. So at this part, you're pretty much done, and you can continue on doing whatever design work you're doing. But to make sure, to make absolutely sure, I like to print them out on paper and then count the holes one by one. This may seem like a little overkill, but there's actually been 2 real-life projects where I accidentally forgot to either delete the middle hole, or I had a extra hole or something just sitting in my project that I didn't see, and it gave me the incorrect hole count, and my gusset did not fit my piece. So I highly suggest printing it out on a piece of paper and just counting off by 10. just to make sure that you have the accurate hole spacing. And here we go with our final check to make sure everything lines up correctly. I wish I could count this fast in real life. And there it is, 65 and 65. Thanks for watching.